I am Dr. Venus, and this is Dr. Venus on Call. I am so glad that you could join me today. I actually wanted to be able to tell you why I decided to relaunch my web show. Initially, when I started with Dr. Venus on Call, I had these grand ideas of how I was going to share all sorts of health and fitness advice um, to everyone that was out there in the world. But it turns out that uh, after uh, filming my very first episode of my web show, which I actually put out on a different platform, uh, I had basically a devastating medical condition hit my very own family, and it affected me quite a bit. So uh, I was unable to continue with the show. Uh, so after some time, I've decided to come back and relaunch my show right here on VidChat, and that's why I am here. Let me get a little deeper into exactly what I'm talking about in terms of what happened in my own family. Um, I'm a physician. I work in the field of physical medicine and rehab. That is my specialty, and that is what I completed my residency program in. As a rehabilitation physician, I find it part of my job to talk to families of my patients, because many of my patients have had um, some sort of devastating condition occur, whether it be a stroke or a spinal cord injury or a brain injury from a car accident. Sometimes it may have been a heart attack and they've needed um, cardiac bypass. There's a lot of different conditions that my patients suffer from, some of which put them in very debilitated states, and family members are then having to struggle to take care of them. And often this comes with a lot of stress and even depression in the family members themselves. So I find myself counseling a lot of the family members on how to deal with their stress and how to manage their loved one and the condition that they're currently in. So all of this experience and all of my medical education, none of it could really prepare me for when something like this actually struck my own family. It wasn't too long ago. It was March 2016 when I was sitting in my living room and I heard my father screaming from his bedroom. I ran, and it actually turned out that he was screaming from his bathroom, and he was down on the floor of his shower. He couldn't get up. I was terrified because I could see in the behind the shower door, he had a sliding glass door, that he was on the ground and his head was pinned up against the door, and he obviously was having difficulty getting up. I tried to pull the shower door open and I couldn't because of the weight of him against the door. I was terrified. I had always believed that in an emergency situation I could act very calmly and reasonably, but it's my father. So I did my best to act very calmly and reasonably and responsibly. Um, I I tried very hard to try to get the door open. I was actually finally able to slowly pull the door open without causing any trauma to my father or moving him around. But he was still stuck on the ground, on the floor of the shower. I couldn't pick him up. Um, I had done the basic exam that I felt was necessary. I had checked whether he was able to move his hands, whether he could move his legs. I looked for any evidence of trauma on his head because I saw his head was up against the wall. And I couldn't. I couldn't find anything significantly wrong. He had some difficulty speaking, but he had some problems expressing himself at times before this incident, so I wasn't sure if he was just very scared and unable to communicate with me. Since I couldn't get him out of the shower, I told him I was going to go to my phone and call 911. And he screamed out. He didn't want me to leave him, and I didn't know what to do. I knew it was very important that I call 911, and so I explained, I can't pick you up. I can't help you right now. I have to get help. So I ran to the phone. I felt horrible leaving my father because he didn't want me to leave him alone, but I had to get to the phone. I called 911. With the phone back in my hand, I raced back to the shower where my father was. Of course, the 911 operator went through many steps of me testing my father, obviously for signs of stroke. It was kind of interesting to me, actually, because I heard the 911 operator telling me, see if he is able to smile, if there's if one side of his face doesn't look like the other, or if he's able to move his hand, or if he's able to talk to you. And I try to explain, actually, I'd already done all of that because I'm a doctor myself. But I thought it was great that 911 operators talk the general public through that, because it's very frightening, and it was just reassuring to know that that's what goes on. I actually have never called into 911 with an emergency like that. So that was good to know. The paramedics arrived fairly quickly, actually, and they were able to get my father out, and we got him to the hospital. By the time I was able to get into the emergency room to speak with the ER physician, he had actually developed a significant paralysis on the right side of his body. He was still able to talk to me, but I could tell that he was a bit confused. He was still following commands, but the ER doctor did say that he did show significant signs of stroke, of course, which I agreed with. After we got the CT back, we realized it was a bleed in the brain, so some of the things that you would do, seeing as how I had acted right away, we were within a window where you would give a clot buster, which has been shown to, of course, be successful in helping regain some of the losses that occurred during a stroke. Some people are able to regain a lot of their function back. So using a clot buster actually was not an option, because it turned out to have been a bleed, whether it had been a bleed from his high blood pressure, which he was also found to have at the time, very high blood pressure, or if it was a bleed from having fallen and his head hitting against the wall. I'm not certain, but in any case, he had a stroke, which was a bleed. So it was my father. I wanted to do more. I felt like I should have been able to do more, but what could I do? It happened, and oh, sounds like we have a plane flying overhead. Perhaps, hopefully that's not bothering all of you too much. Anyway, there was a lot that went through my head as this was happening. I had to get my mother there, I had to get my brother there, I was calling around. It was actually the day before Easter when this happened. So there was a lot to think about. There had been some Easter plans, of course, with family and friends, so Those had to be uh, changed somewhat. Um, oh, wow. I'm as confused now trying to explain all of this as I was then. Uh, it was just a very difficult time. I struggled a lot. I felt that I should have somehow helped prevent this. I'm a doctor. I'm his daughter. I should have known to check his blood pressure very regularly to make sure that it wasn't going too high. I felt somehow I just I blamed myself. That's what I did. It was a very difficult thing for me to wrap my head around, this happening to my father when I was there, when I should have somehow protected him from this. I tried to explain to my family, my mother especially, um, his symptoms, what we could expect during his hospitalization. And of course, I was on top of all of the doctors and all of the tests and all the nurses in terms of what was going on, and trying to make sure only the best care was being given, and every possible test that could be given was being given, and every little sign and symptom was being paid attention to. Because I definitely wanted to somehow make up for my inability to prevent this. Again, I know now that it was not my fault, but these were the things that were running through my head. Anyway, as time passed, my father got better in the hospital. Thank goodness. Thank God. Um, we took him over to a skilled nursing facility where he slowly started to uh, improve in terms of his ability to move around, and tolerate some exercise. He was still quite weak. Then we were actually able to take him over to an acute rehabilitation facility. Excuse me. We were able to take him to an acute rehabilitation facility, and that was a hospital where uh, my medical group actually sees patients. So I knew that we had the very best rehab doctors seeing him, because they were the doctors that I work with in my medical group. Tried to make sure that my dad got VIP service. um, and then it was time to take him home. Now, during all of this, I did my very best to stay on top of my own practice. Um, I never wanted my father to be alone in the hospital, or at the nursing home, or at the rehab hospital. So my mother, myself, and my brother, we basically took shifts at his bedside. He was never alone. My mother would be there for 8 hours. My brother would be there for 8 hours. I would be there for another 8 hours. Um, if I wasn't sleeping, I was working. If I wasn't working, I was with my father. Um, and coming home, very similarly, of course, my father could never be alone. So my mother couldn't handle uh, lifting my father. She herself um, was had a lot of aches and pains, and she's 70. How old is she now? 75 years old. Um, so we couldn't expect her to lift too much weight. So that wouldn't be a safe thing for her to be home alone with my father, so we hired a caregiver. But of course, our caregiver is only there during the day, Monday through Friday. I took a lot of responsibility of myself to take care of my father whenever I came home from work. And of course, on the weekends, I'm by his side as much as possible. I still try to get out um, and do some things on the weekends. My brother and I take shifts, making sure that my mother isn't alone with my father for too long. Because if my father needs to get over to uh, the bathroom to use the toilet, my mom would not be able to do those transfers. So again, can be a very difficult thing. Um, I devoted myself completely to my father. I love him so much, and here he was, needing help for most everything he needed to do. I didn't want to let him down. I didn't want to miss another sign or symptom that could lead to another stroke. So if I wasn't at work, I was right there by his side. Um, it was very, it was very difficult for me, first of all, to get over the fact that it wasn't my fault. I cried and cried and cried whenever I was in my bed asleep or trying to fall asleep. I truly blamed myself quite a bit. I found myself getting extremely exhausted all the time. I was very exhausted. And here I was a physician who counseled family members on how to deal with stresses like a loved one having a stroke. And here I am, feeling depressed, feeling exhausted. I I myself had fallen victim to the very thing that I counsel my patients' families on. I found myself becoming an emotional eater. I just wanted to eat anything and everything that could be considered a comfort food. I didn't care how many calories it had. I didn't care about the artificial sweeteners or flavors or whether it was processed food or not. I just wanted good old-fashioned comfort food. If it was junk food, so be it. I just wanted it. I truly became that emotional eater, finding comfort in foods. I was so exhausted that I had no energy to work out. I had no motivation to work out. Here I am considering myself a health and fitness expert, uh, competing as a national level fitness competitor for almost 20 years, and I didn't feel like working out. I had no energy. Why? That was totally secondary. My father needed my help. So, what do you do when you've completely fallen into this trap of exhaustion and depression and total lack of motivation? There's actually a name for this. Um, in the medical community, we call it Caregiver Syndrome. It's probably a term you might have heard of. Um, it can also be known as caregiver stress or caregiver burnout. The symptoms, I've basically lived them. Depression, anxiety, uh, feeling tired, exhausted, absolutely run down. You may have difficulty sleeping. Uh, you might just overreact to just mild annoyances. Um, or you might discover that you have worsening health problems. In my case, my blood pressure, which had been under actually fairly good control, I started developing increasing blood pressure. So I had to make sure I was on top of taking my blood pressure medication. One of those things which developed actually a couple of years ago, my hypertension, but I had to stay on top of it even more with 2 blood pressure medications because I found that my high blood pressure was worsening with with the care of my father. So all of these symptoms can actually be prevalent when you suffer from caregiver syndrome. What do you do? Basically, you have to do a reality check. You have to know your limits. You can't do everything. You have to just recognize that you have this potential and you're probably actually living this burnout syndrome. So, know your limits. Try to set realistic goals for yourself. Know that there's only so much time that you can give to the care of your loved one, and sometimes you may need to turn to others for help with certain tasks. Another thing you can do, just talk to someone. Talk to anyone that you can, anyone that you feel comfortable confiding in. Maybe a friend, maybe a coworker, maybe even a neighbor. Just talk to someone. It absolutely helps just getting things out. And educate yourself. It can be very helpful to learn lots about your loved one's condition, whether it be a stroke or a brain injury or a spinal cord injury or a heart condition. Really take some time to learn about the condition so that you can be prepared for anything that might happen or anything that you can expect as far as symptoms that they may be showing, or in the case of stroke, educate yourself in terms of the types of things that they may be exhibiting, such as difficulty expressing themselves, or they themselves may be a little bit more flying off at the handle on a whim, it may seem. So know to expect these things. When you know what to expect, then perhaps you can react a little bit better. And stay healthy. That's very, very important. You have to take time for yourself. Try to exercise. Try to eat well. Recognize that this is a problem, this is a trap that you may fall into, and focus even more on taking care of yourself. Because you know what they say, you can't take care of others unless you take care of yourself. It's really important to just sometimes take an hour or two for yourself. You may need to ask for help in terms of taking care of your loved one, but setting that time aside for yourself, it's not just a luxury, it's a necessity. So, that kind of brings me to why I'm here today. I realized myself that I had fallen into this trap, that I had lost the motivation to be healthy and fit, that I had fallen into somewhat of a depression. I had to return to doing the things that I enjoyed, doing the things that I had planned for, like this web show. So I decided to relaunch this show with a little bit of a twist. I am not exactly in the best of shape right now. I still consider myself a health and fitness expert, but I too have fallen into the traps that many of you have fallen into. I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, so why don't we try to help each other? I decided to relaunch this show to go through this with all of you out there. This is my journey back to a healthier life, back to a more fit life, and back to feeling that motivation and energy. I'm still lacking in some of the motivation to work out, but being here right now, today, to show you who I am and what I'm going through, this is motivating for me. And now, all of you are going to keep me accountable, just like I'll help keep you accountable. We'll help keep each other accountable to our health and fitness goals. One last thing on caregiver syndrome. I wanted to explain some avenues or where you could possibly go for help. As I talked a lot about not trying to take it all in yourself, that sometimes you need to get help. There's a lot of different agencies out there and a lot of different types of help in terms of people who can help you take care of your loved one. There's actually adult daycare programs. That's always an option where you can take your loved one to a daycare facility for adults, and they can take part in leisurely activities, um, lots of fun and recreational uh, things on the schedule at an adult daycare program. And then you know that he's with people who are familiar with such conditions and able to take proper care of him while you take care of yourself during the day. Sometimes you can take your loved one to a nursing home. Now, I know a lot of times nursing homes get a bad rap, but there are definitely some good facilities out there. I know because I myself work at one of the skilled nursing facilities, actually a couple of them, and I find that a good mission. Um, some Sometimes you're able to take them to these nursing home facilities just for a short stay. You don't need to take them there and leave them there and only go back to visit them every once in a while, never to bring them back home. You can just have them stay for a short respite stay so that you can again take care of yourself so that you can better take care of them. There are private care aides, of course. You can hire a caregiver, as I did. Um, I found it best for me to just to hire someone Monday through Friday for 8-hour days, um, and that my brother and I could switch off on the weekend so that we could still try to get out and do things that were more social with our friends and such. Also, you can go out. Um, Maybe do an internet search on the Agency on Aging, the local office near you, so that you can learn about services in your area that can be helpful for you. Or you can possibly go to your local AARP office. They are also a wonderful resource in terms of finding helpful uh, organizations or services that may be available to you. Okay, so this is my launch. This is my start. I'm going to get more fit, and hopefully you can learn and I can learn as well in terms of how to return to that healthy and fit lifestyle that I adhered to for so long. I'm eager to get back on the horse, so to speak, and start competing again. I am entering my 20th year of fitness competition, and I can't say that I've been doing it for 20 years unless I get on stage sometime this year. So I am back. I am going to get on stage by the end of the year. So I hope you will join me every week and see how I'm progressing in that department.